What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest Skyrim build on the channel. Today I'll be taking you through a build we've decided to call the Vengeful. We've created this build video because so many of you have asked for it after seeing the character used in our 100% spell absorption video and also our Elder Scrolls 6 vampire video, which you can find links to in the description. This character is a female dark elf vampire lord and will use the white skull face paint. The backstory for the Vengeful is as follows. Once an Ashlander of Morrowind, the Vengeful has lived a life of misery. She lived among her tribe and things were quite peaceful and happy until the Argonian invasion happened. Her people suffered greatly and she was left with none but her mother. Her brothers and sisters had all died in a skirmish. The mother and the Vengeful fled to a nearby coastal town seeking to get transport away from Morrowind. A group took them on board their ship to take them away, but unfortunately this group was a band of pirates, abusing people from Morrowind seeking to flee. They would take refugees from Morrowind and turn them into slaves. These slaves were often used for prostitution, but also sold to corrupt mining groups. It was a foggy night when the ship was almost at the coast of Skyrim, and after sleeping all day, the Vengeful awoke to the entire ship dead, including her mother. All were still in their shackles, including the Vengeful, and she could feel some incredibly sore bite marks on her neck, and some blood was still oozing out. She was covered in lines of dripped red. Her cage door had been left wide open, and her shackles, while still on, were unlocked. The ship was still moving slowly as well. Exploring the ship, the Vengeful saw more and more dead bodies. They were all weirdly dry, and going up to the top deck of the ship, she saw this creature with glowing eyes feeding upon a corpse strung over a crate. In terror, the Vengeful accidentally stepped on a broken bottle, and the creature, which is a vampire, becomes alerted, looks right at her, and then turns into fog. The ship, still moving, ends up crashing into a nearby ice shelf, and the Vengeful jumps off and tries to swim to shore. Surprisingly, the water was not as cold as she expected. Managing to swim ashore, the Vengeful sits and takes some time to clear her mind. As morning comes around and the cloudy skies begin to split, a beam of sunlight shines through. The character feels a bit ill and seeks shelter by going to a farm nearby. Going there begging for shelter, the farmers take pity on the girl and let her stay there. She stays there overnight, but felt so strange she just couldn't sleep. She was traumatized, but more than that, she was extremely hungry. She had no appetite for food, but she wanted something else. She wanted blood. Going into an almost trance-like state to the farmers in their bed, the Vengeful sunk her teeth into their necks and drank them dry. She left the farm craving more blood and began her new life as a vampire. She traveled to a secluded area nearby and made her lair there. She lived here for many decades, reflecting on her past until she decided she will use her curse to become as powerful as possible. She never wanted to be a victim again. You will want to do the Dawnguard storyline and side with the vampires. You'll want to do the College of Winterhold, and of course do the Artefacts of Boethiah quests. Looking at the mods, we have the Ordinator perk Overhaul for all the perks we're using. For one-handed perks, we're going to have the tree up the very far left, which allows you to get decapitation, sprint attacks, and benefits your power attacks. You're also going to want the entire sword tree. For alteration perks, we're going to have the magic resistance perks, mage armor, robes of deflection, stability, and the outer self perks. You'll also want the intuitive magic perks, which means novice and apprentice spells from any school are free to cast. The Spellblade perk will also be used. In the destruction tree, we're going to have the entire fire tree for all the fire related perks, as well as the runecaster perk to then get the battle mage perk and the war of the elements perk. The battle mage perk makes perks that enhance dual cast spells also enhance single hand casted spells if you're holding a weapon in the other hand. You'll also want the robes of power perk, counter blast, and the elemental specialization perk. For restoration perks, we're going to be going up the tree that leads to necropotence, which is really just the renamed necromage perk. You can get other perks in this tree if you want. The skills therefore are one-handed destruction, alteration, and restoration. One-handed is to masterfully cut enemies apart with your blade, destruction to burn them alive, alteration to use Okato's recital, flesh spells and paralyze, and restoration to use healing to stay alive and get the necromage equivalent perk. Looking at the spell Okato's Recital, it allows you to store 3 spells that will become active when you enter battle. Once you've stored them, it actually costs nothing to cast them, and we're going to be having Sword and Sorcery, Ebony Flesh, and Salamander Scales. Salamander Scales not only makes you look like you're covered in fiery scales, which is awesome, but also gives you a massive fire resistance and allows you to absorb 30% of magicka from fire spells. Sword and Sorcery makes your sword 25% better and your spells 25% better when you have them both equipped, one in each hand. The Midas Magic and Apocalypse Magic mods will also be used for all the spells like this we're using. Have a look at all the options you can have. With these mods, you're also going to get your main destruction fire spell, which is Hellfire. Hellfire is colored green, and with all our bonuses and effects, it does 67 points of fire damage, ignoring fire resistance, and for 30 seconds afterwards, the ground beneath will catch on fire. Next up, you'll want the Better Vampires mod to get new vampire abilities and passive bonuses, and you actually go up vampire ranks by feeding. You still have normal vampire stages, but your overall power comes from your total amount of feeding. One of the best things this mod does, as you can see, is make you jump higher, so you will feel much more like a superhuman. At the highest vampire rank, you'll get your weapon attack speed increased by 15%, have your destruction spells 25% stronger, and your damage resistance increased by 35%, and even have moderate health and stamina regeneration outside during the day. You'll also want to use the Royal Bloodline Vampire Lord mod, which extends your Vampire Lord perks and allows you to get new abilities and look more like Harkon's Vampire Lord form, having Vampire Lord armor, and you can also get a perk called Evolved Wings, which allows you to fly around wherever you please. We'll also be using the Tel Nalta 2 mod, which gives you a personal Telvanni tower house rich in detail, and also a Master Telvanni hood, which gives you 80 more magicka points and makes spells from all schools of magic cost 17% less to cast. You'll also get the Master Telvanni robes, and we chose the brown variant. This gives you 57 extra magicka points, 230% faster magicka regen, and makes destruction cost 17% less magicka to cast. On top of that, we're wearing Telvanni shoes, which gives you 80% shock resistance, which is super helpful against mages. All this gear can be bought from NPC Hecate, who you will find at Tel Nalta. Next up, the Vengeful will want the Artefacts of Boethiah mod to get the sword being used, which will originally be Gold Brand but then be upgraded to Elton Brand. Elton Brand burns a target for 40 points of damage, makes targets on fire take extra damage, power attacks will burn for 10 seconds, and it also creates a fire cloak when blocking. It's very powerful and also doesn't need any soul gems to recharge. It recharges slowly over time. Elton Brand also gives you Elton Brand's Blessing, which makes Elton Brand do 25% more damage and makes magicka regen 25% faster. Finally, you'll want the alternate start mod to choose the option that you're a vampire in a secluded lair. We've gone with a lot of mods this week, and a link to all of them can be found in the description alongside with a perk link for a non-Ordinator Overhaul character. Now you know the backstory for the Vengeful, all the mods, perks, skills, and gear we're using. Something interesting about the Vengeful, however, is that she doesn't have a set playstyle. In combat, you will fight very fast and manically, and always cast Hellfire until your enemies are close enough to slash, but really you can do whatever it is you want. The reason there is no set plan is because you'll constantly be using different vampire powers depending on your situation and mood. You can vanish into mist, teleport behind targets, and impale them with your sword. You can also of course switch to Vampire Lord form if you're feeling incredibly evil. I'd also like to mention that the power to teleport behind enemies to kill them is called Blink Attack. One thing I guess that does carry across all playstyle combinations and scenarios would be that while you fight aggressively, you're not stupid. So if you can avoid melee characters and kill them in an inferno of green flames, then you will do so. The stat spread for the Vengeful is 10% stamina to sprint and power attack, 45% health to stay alive when taking hits, and 45% magicka to constantly burn your enemies and use all your other spells too. Remember, Okado's Reciter will help out your magicka levels majorly, as it won't cost you anything to apply your setup spells. For a standing stone, there are a couple of options that work out nicely. You can go with the Lord Stone for 50 more points of armor rating and a 25% resistance to magic, or you could go with the Atronach Stone for 50 more points of magicka, 50% spell absorption, but minus 50% magicka regen. You won't really notice this drawback. And that wraps up this week's Skyrim build, the Vengeful. Thanks for watching, and please do press the subscribe button so you can see more Elder Scrolls videos and also a mass of great Fallout 4 content upon the game's release in November. My name is Michael, like the video if you enjoy our content, and I'll see you soon ready to nerd out with some more Skyrim, Fallout, and Star Wars.